Hopefully we can see that. I want to chat today, I'm going to share a couple of sports stories around thriving through uncertainty. I picked the stories to illustrate a couple of messages. Obviously, there's a lot more than just the messages I'm sharing, hopefully, in these stories, and hopefully some interest value as well. And I'm fully aware 18 months into this pandemic and lockdowns and stuff we're going through that many of us have had this type of experience, sitting, staring at our computer screen with sort of overwhelmed with digital fatigue. So hopefully I aim to not contribute in the next sort of 30 or 45 minutes to any more of this. And so as I said, I'm going to pick three very simple points. I invite you to translate whatever relevance for you and translate this back into your context. And the first point I want to discuss is trusting good process. And there's two very specific, sorry, I'm not sure why my presentation is doing that. I'm just going to quickly, okay, no, I'll just sort that out. So in trusting good process, there's two words there. One is trust and two is good process. And in terms of good process, it's very simple. If you want to be successful in any field and you're the front of the curve, you need to have very good processes. That's not it's a non-negotiable. And by good process, certainly in cricket, which I'm going to talk mostly to, it means understanding what the best in the world are doing and make sure that you considered all of those, number one. Number two, that needs to be adapted and changed back into your context and made very specific for you, your team, your clients, etc. And number three, with that good process, it constantly needs to be refined and we need to keep questioning it. Just having a good process in these days for more than a short period of time sometimes is not enough. We need to constantly make sure that we're right at the front of the performance curve. But having a good process is not really that relevant if we don't trust it, and particularly when times get tough, if that goes out the window and we start deviating from it. And the story I'm going to use to illustrate that is during the 2011 World Cup, where Gary Kirst and myself were coaching the Indian team. At the time, no team had ever won a World Cup at home. And the thinking behind it was that the pressure of a home World Cup was just too much for the host nation. And anyone who vaguely understands cricket in India, without a doubt, that's the country that puts the most amount of pressure on their players than any other country in the world. And if India made it to the final, they would have been playing at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai, which is the loudest stadium in the world cricket by a country mile. It would have been Sachin Tendulkar's fifth and final World Cup. It would be a final in front of his home ground. There could be no more pressure in the world that had ever been or existed in the world of cricket at the time than India playing a final in Mumbai in 2011. So we knew we had to prepare the players, should we get there, for the highest amount of pressure that they had ever experienced. So we found ourselves in the quarterfinal of that tournament in 2011 facing the Australian team, which was a little bit unfortunate in a way at the time for the game of cricket, because India and Australia were possibly two of the strongest teams at the World Cup then, and we expected, all things being equal, for India to meet Australia in the final, but we met in the quarterfinal, and we knew, both teams knew, whoever won this encounter had a better chance or not of going the distance in that tournament. So it was a big one for all of us. We're playing at Nagpur, and the day before the game, Gary Kirstner's head coach and myself had a conversation, as we always did before a game and in preparation for the meeting the night before the game. And the conversation went something like this. So Gary said, is there anything we can discuss about this Australian team that we haven't already discussed within the team environment? The reality is we played them about 11 times in the previous 10 months. And the answer was no. We have discussed everything about every player we're going to play against tomorrow in previous encounters. The second question was, is there anything we can discuss with the team about this particular venue that we haven't discussed or brought into the conversation? We played at Nagpur 3 times in that season already, so we already knew all the stats about the ground, how it played, batting first and second, daytime and nighttime, how the pitch unfolded, the size of the boundaries, etc. There was nothing new we could bring to the team. And the other question was, well, is there anything we need to discuss? This is now, we got to the qualifier stage. We got through the round robin. And we had a policy there that we, with a team, and we had built for 3 years to this World Cup, that we're going to approach every game with exactly the same process, which was focusing on playing great cricket, being informed of playing great cricket with no focus on the outcome whatsoever. And we'd long before planned by the fact that we were not going to approach any quarterfinal, semi-final, or final any differently to another game. We wanted it to be another game of cricket. So there was nothing we could really bring that would be new to this team meeting the night before the quarterfinal in the World Cup 2011. So we couldn't not have a meeting. So when the team arrived in the meeting, and I wrote on a whiteboard in front of the room, I just wrote one question: what's really important for tomorrow? When the whole team was seated, there's only 15 players in the World Cup squad, and all the support staff were in there. Gary got up front of the room and he said, guys, there's only one question we're going to discuss today. What's really important for tomorrow? But before we discuss it, I'm going to ask the entire support staff to please leave the room, including Gary himself. And he said, it's up to you players, the 15 of you, to discuss this question. When you have finished discussing the question, the meeting's over and you're free to leave. And please, players, you do not need to tell any of the coaching staff, including myself, what you spoke about. And coaches, please don't ask the players what they're going to speak about. It's their conversation. And the support staff left the room. And Gary, myself, and Eric Simons, a fellow South African who was the bowling coach at the time, we went down the corridor, grabbed ourselves a cappuccino, and we sort of started having this discussion. One, like questioning, is it smart the day before the biggest game this team's ever played in their careers, a World Cup quarterfinal, that we don't give any input whatsoever as coaches and we leave it totally up to the players? Number one, but we believed in that. We knew we had the processes in place that had set the players up to be able to take full control. Number one. And number two, we said, well, I wonder how long this is going to take. 15, 20 minutes. And we sort of had a wager. It was a full 45 minutes before, sorry, 55 minutes before the doors opened and the players came out of that meeting room. And I still get goosebumps now when I think about watching those players walking towards us, how tall they walked. And there was just something about them that said, we have got this. We know what we need to do tomorrow. We went out the next day against Australia and we beat them comprehensively. This is a photograph of Yuvraj Singh. It just cut Brett Lee for a 4, and we beat them in about 36 of the 50 overs. Really comprehensive victory. To this day, 10 years later, in fact, I spoke to Gary Kirsten quite recently, and no surprise, the two of us are speaking after some of the allegations that are going on in a certain hearing in South African cricket, and actually said to Gary, did you ever know what the players discussed in that meeting? And his answer was no. To this day, he does not know. And he asked me, and I also don't know. But I tell the story to illustrate the fact that one of the points was we had built such a solid process and put such a clear process in place, how we're going to go about each game. Part of that was really trusting the players and including the players in every decision we made, that we know we could trust them to go into a meeting and have their own meeting and not report anything in the lead up to what was the biggest game of their lives at the time. And if I just to fast forward about a week later, we ended up finding ourselves at this very stadium, and this was where the photograph was taken. We found ourselves at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai playing the World Cup final in Mumbai in Sachin Tendulkar's 5th and final World Cup, and his last game playing one-day cricket for India. And I remember as we were building, we'd sort of started planning a year out specifically for this very night. And one of the things that I'd been doing in my room, in my sort of spare time, and spending a lot of time ahead thinking, if we get here, me as the mental conditioning coach, it's going to be my opportunity to stand up, be it the night before the game or the morning of the game, and give that Al Pacino-like speech where this is the pinnacle of the player's career. And me as the mental guy and the motivator, I'm going to deliver that speech. And I had all sorts of ideas in my head, how I was going to just lift and inspire and give clarity and direction to these superstars playing the final. When we walked into that team meeting, I ended up not delivering anything like the speech that I'd been planning in my head over and over for literally 13 months. We knew exactly what needed to happen. And I'll tell you literally verbatim what my speech was when they handed over to me. And I said to the players, guys, this is like a Bollywood movie. We have got the best actors. We know exactly what our roles are tomorrow. And all that's required is that we go out there and perform our roles. And if we do, we will prevail. And that was it. There was nothing new I needed to say. We had the players, we had the processes, we were ready. Nobody needed to do anything different. We also knew that particularly in finals, and this is not just a cricket final, this is actually any sporting final in the world, particularly in a team sport, very seldom do we see teams and really play unbelievable games, play out of their socks. You don't see exceptional team performances in finals. Really what happens in finals is it's the team that panics the least in those high pressure situations that wins. We know both teams are panicking and individuals in both teams are panicking. That's normal. But it's just the people in times of uncertainty and extreme pressure, very often, who panic the least, who prevail. And we're very fortunate in that 2011 to end up lifting that trophy at the end of the game against the final in Sri Lanka. And I sincerely hope it's sometime soon that Gary Kirsten, Eric Simons, and myself, at the moment, we are the only 3 South Africans who know what it's like to win a Cricket World Cup. Hopefully very soon some more South Africans can experience that feeling. So it's having good processes, but it's having the trust in them under pressure to be able to stick with those processes, not blindly, but smartly. The second piece I want to talk to is scoring our 1s and 2s. What do I mean by this? So with the Rajasthan Royals team, this is an IPL team in the year 2013, so I'm going back a bit. They were bottom of the log for 4 years. The reason this IPL team had been bottom of the log was all teams are given about $13 million to buy players in the player auction. The owners of this team gave the team only 50% of that salary cap, about $6.5 million, to go into the auction to compete for players, and they kept the other 50% of the salary cap back to run the franchise. So when it came to auction time, the Royals just did not have the money to be able to compete for the big name players. They had to employ an auction strategy of identifying young, high potential players who came fairly cheap. So when they arrived at each of those 4 IPLs in the previous 4 years, they were literally the underdogs. They did not have the players that the other big teams had. So they'd earned their right to be at the bottom of the log. There was a captain by the name of Rahul Dravid, an Indian cricketer who was the captain at the time. I worked with him for 3 years with the Indian team, and he understood my belief in how I believe coaching and leadership needs to fundamentally change in sport going forward. And it's a change that is already happening in many forward-thinking businesses, but just sport hasn't woken it up. At the time, hadn't woken up to it yet, and most sports haven't woken up either. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of how I ended up being appointed as head coach, more because it illustrates an extreme version of my belief in leadership, not just in cricket coaching, but in almost all forms of leadership, including to a degree parenting. So Rahul, I had never coached a cricket team in my life. I had never planned to coach a cricket team. It wasn't part of my dream. I'm not qualified to coach a cricket team. And although I've been involved in cricket, honestly, I probably know enough about the technical, tactical, and strategic side of cricket to be able to coach a school's first team. Certainly, I don't have the cricket knowledge and expertise to coach at the professional level. And Rahul said to me, would you be interested in coaching a team? Rather than coaching coaches around how to shift the way they're doing things, why don't you come to this team? We've got nothing to lose. We've tried everything. Come and do it here. So Rahul got me onto the final list. There was myself and then 3 other proper cricket coaches, and we got the opportunity to be interviewed by a 7-man interview panel, and of which one of them happened to be Clive Woodward, who was the 2003 English World Cup rugby winning coach. And I knew Clive had also, he took the British Lions team, I think in 2000, and I forget the date, someone will know. But when he took the British Lions team as head coach to New Zealand, he took 45 players and he took 28 support staff to support those 45 players in a 3-week tour. So I knew that Clive is a very big believer in having expert consultants in the various different roles. In the interview, Clive said to me, Paddy, so I believe you're not actually a cricket coach, which incidentally is not a great question to get in an interview for a cricket coaching job. But my answer was yes, I've never coached a cricket team before. And he said to me, so I'm interested, you're obviously going to get an expertise that you don't have. So you're going to get a batting coach and a bowling coach and maybe a fielding coach. And if you get coaches that are more experienced than you, which the reality, all cricket coaches would have been more experienced than me at the time. And he said, but now for 2 months, you're going to be leading people who are much more experienced than you in the cricket coaching world. And do you see a problem leading people and having people to report to you who, you know, are more experienced than you? And if so, how will you navigate that problem? My answer to him illustrates my belief in coaching. I said to him, if you offer me the job, there will be no problem. There will be no dynamic, because my prerequisite before accepting the job is I want no batting coach, no bowling coach, no fielding coach, and no fitness trainer. I want no experts in the support staff. And there was this dead silence, an interview panel of 7. And sort of people looked around at each other, and eventually one of the Indian owners looked forward with this blank look and he said to me, what do you mean? And my answer to him was, you're going to give me 25 players who come from 5 different countries, all professional cricketers. In this year alone, they played under more than 25 different coaches, each with their idea of how to play T20 cricket. They would have played under more than 25 different captains, and between them will have over 1,000 games of T20 experience. That's the expertise I'm going to use to build the entire campaign. I think one of the reasons I got the job, I can just imagine the chief accountant sitting in that meeting, making some notes, going like, no batting coach, no bowling coach, no fielding coach, no fit. Saves on 4 salaries. Give that oak from Cape Town the job. And he's not even a proper coach, so we don't even have to pay him properly, which is a true story. So I really fitted this restrictive salary cap team very beautifully. And I ended up getting the job. And in that first season, we didn't get any new players. We had no expert coaches. I said, not even a fitness trainer. I wanted players to take full responsibility of making the decisions collectively, because I believe the intelligence in sport needs to sit on the field, not on the sideline, where when something goes wrong, you rely on even a very highly paid water boy to run on the field to tell people what to do. I believe the more intelligence that sits on the field, the quicker you can make those key decisions in the critical moments of the game. And very often that translates to whoever makes the best decision the quickest is able to capitalize on those key moments when the game is in the balance. When I joined the team, a couple of weeks later, we sat down, and as we do, we had a very in-depth analysis, and we've got amazing big data and video to be able to analyze, not dissimilar to some of the stuff that Rory gave you, but in cricket, we've got an amazing amount of data on individuals, on players, on all different ways of looking at cricket statistics. And we pulled this thing apart to try and figure out where might the competitive advantage lie for us. Very simply, what the stats said then, it still says so today. The team that wins T20 cricket matches generally is the team that hit the most 4s and 6s. So I looked at our top 7 batsmen and I compared them to the top 7 batsmen of the other 7 IPL, Indian Premier League franchise teams. And we came out 8th out of 8th in terms of our ability to hit 4s and 6s. So we clearly did not have the batting power to be competitive. In order to stop people hitting 4s and 6s, you need to get their 4 and 6 hitting batsmen out. So I looked at our top 7 bowlers and compared them to the top 7 bowlers of the other teams in terms of the ability to get the top 7 batsmen out. And we came out at the end of that, our numbers crunched, we were the 7th best out of 8 teams in terms of being able to get wickets. So when I looked at that traditional T20 stats, this team had earned their place at the bottom of the log. However, I couldn't then turn around to the owners and say, I'm sorry, you haven't given me enough to work with here. So we looked and we turned this thing around and around with particularly myself, Rahul Dravid, and some of our brains trust. And we eventually found what we thought might be the answer, and it was sitting right under our noses. Remember what I said earlier, we relied on finding young, high potential players, and the answer lay in the word young, or at least we thought it did. It meant we were fitter, faster, more injury-free than some of the other players who had senior international players, Jacques Cullis's, Shane Watson's, Ricky Pontings, who were great players, but they were at the end of their career and they weren't as agile as they used to be when they were youngsters. We had the agility in our team. So what we decided to do was make ones and twos really, really important. And we went into detail around this. When we're fielding, how do we cut down as many ones and twos as humanly possible? And we came up with strategies that are not conventional strategies in T20 cricket. Briefly, for the cricket enthusiasts, you will know in T20 cricket, after the 6-over power play, where you have to have 7 fielders in the ring and only 2 on the boundary, after that 6 overs, you can put 5 fielders in the boundary to defend the important 4s and 6s, and you just keep 4 fielders in the inner ring. What we did that year is we kept 5 and sometimes 6 fielders in the inner ring. We sacrificed 1 or 2 boundary fielders, and the message we sent the opposition was, you can have the boundaries because we know you're probably going to get more than us anyway, but you've got to get the ball through or over extra fielders in the inner ring, and we're going to stop you hitting those 1s and 2s. Similarly, when we batted, we understood in great detail which fielders in their team have got, what kind of arms have they got, particularly the fielders on the boundary. Have they got a great arm? And if they didn't have a good arm or they'd recently had an injury, we knew even if the ball was in their hand, we would take the risk of running a second run just for the throw. And in our meetings, we would keep score of this, and we would keep rewarding players' efforts in either defending the 1 or 2 or scoring them. At the end of that season, it's 14 round robin games. If you go through the finals, there's 18 games. This exact same team of underdogs, we got through to the IPL finals. Like happens in, or it used to, it doesn't happen anymore, but the Champions League cricket used to happen then. It's the same as the Champions League soccer, where the top teams, a T20 team in each of the countries, come together to play a Champions League. We ended up going unbeaten until the Champions League final with that exact same team of underdogs. And still to this day, we hold a record for the highest home run winning streak. In that season, we won 13 out of 13 home games. And we beat all of the teams that had much bigger, much more experienced players than ourselves. When we did our stats at the end of that 2013 season between the IPL and the Champions League, there were 22 matches, and we looked at 4s and 6s. And just out of interest, the average run scored per innings of those 22 games was 163. Opposition scored on average 18 runs more than us per game in 4s and 6s, which is significant when you think that 163 runs per innings is scored on average. When it came to 1 and 2s, the scores that don't count, they do not feature in the highlights package. They do not get the big applause. We scored on average 21 runs per game more than the opposition. And it was in this area that we managed to get the competitive advantage and get through to 2 finals. And I said, set up that home run winning streak that is unbeaten until today. So the question I ask is, where are your 1s and 2s? Those small daily habits at home, at the office, that can change your game. An environment where many of us are lured into, like T20 cricketers, of chasing the big deal, chasing the big clients, chasing that thing that's going to really get us across the line and that is going to get us the applause or whatever it might be, and the public victories. But where are those little 1s and 2s that happen in the background that, particularly in tough times, can contribute to us getting ahead? And I'm just going to share, and maybe you want to take a screenshot of this, just give me 1 or 2 clicks and then we will have the whole screen here. But just a very simple exercise, if anyone is interested in this, just give you a little takeaway here. List any area of your life that is relevant or plays a part. Yeah, I've just got things like career, family, finance, your social life, your health, hobbies, maybe it's your home improvement, studies, whatever it might be. And we can look at each of those areas of our life in a simple investment versus return equation, where the return we get in that area is the quality of experience in that particular area of our life, And if you want to have an increased or improved quality of experience, what is required is to make slight adjustments in our investments in terms of time or habits in that area. And again, I invite you to take a screenshot or whatever of this. And if there's relevance for you, go and figure out 8 or 10 areas of your life and do this very simple balance sheet equation. Maybe score on the right-hand side at the moment, and a score of 1 to 10. How happy are you with your quality experience in that area right now? 10 out of 10 is I'm super happy. And then go and do the same assessment of how happy, how smart would you assess your habit, your investment and habits in time in that area, and see then in that simple balance sheet where there is opportunity to make some adjustments in time and habits to give you a different or better quality of experience. And again, this is about the small little daily habits. And the one I'd like to really draw attention to here, which is probably as if not more relevant than any of the others at this time, is that one around health, specifically your mental health. What are you doing to invest in your mental health to keep it in the best possible space? Mental health. Number 2, your physical health. This has been a time where a lot of us have allowed our physical health to slip. What can you do? What investment can you make? And the other piece that's least spoken about and probably more difficult to measure is our emotional health in terms of the important relationships in our lives. Where is your mental, emotional, physical health? Give it a score, and what can you do to improve that? Because only if you're in a good space can you be in a place to serve your family, to serve your friends, to serve your clients. The reality, if you're in a shit space, if your petrol tanks are really depleted, you're not that much use to other people around you. So let's fill our tanks up, and this is one way and one idea to do it. The final piece, and again, it's about playing the long game. And I'm going to illustrate this here with 2 fairly extreme examples from sport. Again, I invite you to translate these examples to their relevance for you. I don't assume that any of us are fall into the category or the danger of slipping into these, but just take the lessons from these. So this first picture, I'm sure many of us will recognize. It's certainly the cricket followers. This is a photograph of an Australian cricketer's hands taken by a television camera here at Newlands. I think it's 3 years ago now. And this, very briefly, the background to this, and maybe some stuff that we're not aware of. So this was a test series, Australia against South Africa. In this particular game at Newlands, the Australians were bowling, South Africans were batting, and the advantage was shifting in the direction of the South African batsman. And the Australians knew we need to do something to get some of this advantage back. One of the most common things that is done in cricket is what you want to do is you want to get the ball to reverse swing. That places the advantage significantly on the side of the bowling team compared to the batting team. Again, very briefly, in cricket, you have conventional swing. That's where one side of the ball is shiny in relation to the other side. And in its flight path, let's say the shiny side is on this side, the ball will, some stage in the flight path will deviate away from the shiny side and will swing as it approaches the batsman. The big thing about conventional swing is that it begins swinging or deviating somewhere midway in the flight path between the bowler and the batsman. What that means is the batsman has time to pick up the deviation because it starts, as I said, somewhere mid-flight. In contrast, reverse swing is where one side of the ball is significantly more damaged than the other side. And as the ball is traveling on the damaged side, exactly the same as happens with a golf ball, you start getting some turbulent air that's created by the damaged side. As that turbulent air forms a little pocket around the ball, the oncoming air hits that turbulent air and not the ball. And as a result of that, the air travels much quicker over the turbulent pocket on the outside of the ball, just like a golf ball. And the ball swings very, very late in the flight path because it takes a lot longer for this aerodynamics to form on the side. So number one, it swings much later in the flight path than conventional swing, and it swings really violently. So the batsmen, number one, don't have as much time to see it, and they don't have as much time to adjust because it swings a lot more violently than conventional swing. So that's just briefly why reverse swing is so much more of an advantage than conventional swing. The Australian team, the previous test match in cricket, the reality is we all know who in the opposition team are the ball scratchers. And a lot of teams do have a ball scratcher. And we also know when the ball scratching happens. It's actually quite simple. As you'll notice in cricket, and again, I'm giving a little bit of insight here. Hopefully there's some relevance. We've got some cricket people here. But what to look out for is during the course of the normal course of the game, when the ball goes through to the wicket keeper, they'll catch it, throw to one of the slips, or throw to maybe another fielder who'll throw to a cover fielder who'll throw to mid-off, and it'll get back to the bowler. So it'll pass through 2-3 sets of hands. When it's time for the ball to start reverse swinging, what you'll see is the ball goes to the wicket keeper, and from the wicket keeper, it'll go directly to one player who's close, generally who's pretty close to the bowler. The ball will stay for a long period of time with that one player, and then it'll go straight back to the bowler. So the ball travels differently. One is through 3-4 sets of hands, the other is just through one set of hands, and you know that person is working the ball. Whether they're working legally, illegally, we're not sure. But again, in cricket, we know who the guys are who are good at illegally altering the shape of the ball, and you're not allowed to change the shape of the ball artificially, i.e. with your thumbnails or with your teeth or with a piece of sandpaper. We knew David Warner in the Australian team is the ball scratcher. David Warner knew we knew. So at the break, when they went in for a tea interval, David Warner, who's a senior player in the Australian team, and this is the important piece now, the equation that didn't necessarily come out, is the Australian team had developed a win at all costs attitude and energy and language within the team. And in fact, the coach at the time, Darren Lehman, and the players would actually say, guys, we have to win at all costs. Cricket Australia, in fact, paid the Australian cricket team a lot more money to win matches than to draw test matches. One of the only teams that had such a big difference between drawing and winning, which even the employers encouraged players and to do whatever you can to win because we prize that very highly. So certain behaviors, and Michael Clark, the previous captain, was one of those players who really bought in these more unethical ways about winning at all costs, which includes, for example, verbal abuse and sledging. And that's a story for another day. So the win at all costs language and approach was in this team. David Warner went up to Cameron Bancroft. He was a young player. He had only been in the Australian team for 9 months. He was prepared to do whatever it took to be able to help his team, to contribute, to be accepted and be part of this national team. And David Warner is a very stereotypical, well-known bully. And he coerced Cameron Bancroft to take a piece of sandpaper onto the field and sandpaper the ball. Warner would normally be the guy who did it. He was worried about getting caught, so he gave it to somebody else to do. At the time, Steve Smith was the captain, and Steve overheard or witnessed that conversation, but chose to not step in and do anything about it because it lined up with the Australian win at all costs approach. The rest was history. He got caught on camera. There was a big scandal as a result. Cameron Bancroft, the youngster, was banned for 9 months. That was, I think, 3.5 years ago now. He hasn't made his way back into the national team. He won't do it. His international career was over as a result of this one incident. David Warner was banned for ever holding a position of leadership in Australian cricket until he dies, even if it's a coaching position or selector's position. And he was banned for a year from playing cricket. Steve Smith, the captain, who witnessed the conversation and did nothing, was banned from captaincy for 2 years. Again, he hasn't got his captaincy back, and it's unlikely that he will. And he was banned for playing for a year for Australia. In that 1 year that Steve Smith did not play cricket for Australia, he lost the equivalent of 5 million Australian dollars in income, which translates to about 50 million South African rand. That was the consequence. And I want to briefly just show you, just to drive this point home, a 1-minute video of Steve Smith's interview post that.
To all of my teammates, to fans of cricket all over the world, and to all Australians who are disappointed and angry, I'm sorry. I made a serious error of judgment, and I now understand the consequences. I'll do everything I can to make up for my mistake and the damage it's caused. I know I'll regret this for the rest of my life. I'm absolutely gutted. I hope in time I can earn back respect and forgiveness anytime you think about making a questionable decision. Think about who you're affecting. You're affecting your parents, and to see the way my old man's been. And
thanks, everybody.
and my mum, it hurts.
Okay, so the reason I illustrate this, and it is an extreme example, but it's an example of when we act to bring about a short-term result, whether it's what Steve's sandpapering the ball, Steve Smith, if they succeeded in sandpapering the ball, they would have got an advantage for maybe a half an hour period. It wouldn't have guaranteed a win in that test match or the next test match. In order to keep winning, they would have needed to have kept doing this thing. And it's the same that happens with almost anything slightly unethical, illegal. It delivers a short-term win, and we need to continue doing it in order to keep getting those wins. However, the consequence or the impact of getting caught is significantly more long-term than the benefit of not getting caught. And just interesting here, and I've used this in a few conversations before, particularly to younger folk, which is not necessarily us here. It also is a wonderful example of the three stereotypes that often happen, and that we will all find ourselves somewhere in one of these roles or close to one of these roles. We will be in and around of the opportunity to be that bully, that senior person who's in a position to potentially coerce somebody else to do something that we don't necessarily want to do. Or for younger people might find themselves in that victim role where we asked to do something and we don't really have a voice, or we don't think we have a voice to stand up and say no, and or we will find ourselves somewhere around the position of we are witness and we have seen something like this happen. And it's up to us as individuals to choose what are we going to do, what position are we going to take when we find ourselves in and around any one of these three positions. And again, I'm not going to tell any of us what to do, but what happens, it's our value system, our personal ethics and value systems and our character that will determine what we do. And as we saw here, there's significant consequence or impact to whatever decision we choose to make in that one moment. Again, an extreme example, and I'm going to, on the other side of the coin, offer another fairly extreme example, and I'm sure only the really avid golfers would know who this photograph is. This is a photograph of Bobby Jones from literally in the 1920s. Some of us may have heard or know something of the story. Bobby Jones was playing in the US Open of golf. He was playing on finals day, which at the time was the biggest golf tournament in the world. Bobby went to address a ball, and when he grounded his club, he touched a blade of grass that caused the ball to move ever so slightly. He stepped back and he said to the course official next to him, "I caused that ball to move when I addressed it." In golf, when you do that, it counts as a stroke. The course official said, "I didn't see anything, I was watching." Interestingly, in those days, the course official consulted the spectators who were nearby. Nobody saw the ball move. Such was the minuscule amount that it did move. They went and they spoke to, there was a delay in play. They spoke to the officials, and the official ruling came back to Bobby Jones, and they said, "As far as we're concerned, the ball did not move. Nobody witnessed it moving. It's over to you." And Bobby Jones said, "I know, I saw the ball move. I'm calling a shot on myself." This was finals day of the US Open of Golf. By the end of finals day, Bobby Jones lost by one stroke. And that was the stroke he called on himself. 100 years later, the highest award that the United States Professional Golfers Association can award to this day is the Bobby Jones Award for Sportsmanship. This story illustrates the converse to the other. By doing the right thing might not give us the advantage, it might count against us. It significantly counted against Bobby Jones for doing the right thing. However, the long-term impact of doing the right thing, well, the impact of doing the right thing lasts significantly into the long term. So we will all be in and around opportunities. And maybe it's not the wrong thing. Maybe it's just a panic decision, a sudden decision. Just know that whatever our decision might be in that short-term period, the impact of it is almost always lasts significantly more into the long term. So that was just 3 sort of stories to illustrate 3 points. So hopefully there was some interest, value, and some other stuff you could take from that. But during uncertain times, have a good process, constantly refine your good process, and then hold your nerve around it and trust it. The second thing, on a daily basis, score your 1s and 2s. They're available every single day. Signing the big clients, particularly in this market, is not necessarily available to you every day. However, the small wins are, and they add up. If you take one of the biggest achievements any cricketer can accomplish in the game of cricket is to score Test match 100. If you go and look at the stats, almost every single Test match 100 comprises more runs in 1s and 2s than it does in 4s and 6s. They don't make the highlights package, but you can't score 100 without accumulating significant amount of 1s and 2s. And the beautiful thing about them, in cricket, they're available literally every ball, every over. In life, they're available every day. And the third piece is keep perspective. Let's make sure that we play the long game. The times that we're going through now, we've been through, this too shall pass. But the decisions we make in this time, they're going to last a lot longer. The impact of them are going to last a lot longer than these times will last. So on that, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and share. Thanks very, very, very much, particularly for you giving up your time to stare at your computer screen for yet another hour and a half. We're doing it for 18 months. And if there is time, Ludi or Alex, I'm very happy to take a couple of questions.